Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello, I'm Rory, and with me, as always, is Ken. How are you this morning, Ken?
Exceptionally well, Rory. Hope that you are too. And I also hope that you listening to this are well. You've joined us on the Counselling Tutor Podcast. And this is episode 169. We sure are clicking through those episodes, Rory. Yeah. We've got 3 topics that we're going to be covering today, starting with our student check-in, where we look at something that affects students in training, counselling at the moment, and we're going to be looking at mastering counselling skills, and we also have a great handout for that, so definitely want to stay tuned for that. And I think that's a topic that is appropriate to anybody. It doesn't matter how long that we've been practicing, re-looking at those skills and focusing on them, always useful. Then our second area today is the Digital Counselling Revolution, where we look at how technology is playing a part in today's world in therapy. And we're going to be looking at producing a client information sheet. So what is the information that we would give a client before engaging in counselling, to tell them a little bit about how it all works. And then our final topic is Practice Matters, where we look at what we might be presented with as a qualified practitioner in practice. And today we're going to be looking at working with suicidal clients. So definitely a lot of information covered today, Rory.
Yeah, absolutely. And we start off by mastering counselling skills. I don't know about you, Ken, but I can remember as a very nervous student doing my skills practice and getting it, quite frankly, spectacularly wrong.
I can certainly relate to that. I really can. Yeah. And, you know, we speak about skills often, and I recognize skills as being vitally important. You know, the theory that we learn in the classroom with regards to what our modality is really important because it underpins what we offer. But when we're in the room with a client or working online with a client, it's our skills that facilitate the relationship, the trust develops from our rapport, and I guess it all boils down to the skills at the end of the day.
Yes, and it's. I think it's really interesting. I think that Carl Rogers certainly identified this. That it's when you listen to your skills, and you listen with a kindness to yourself, and a appetite for learning, that your skills develop. And it's really noticeable when we taught students that, students may be very hard on themselves. I'll never get this right. And the thing is, with any skill, mastery takes time. Nobody carves wood, with any skill, on the first go. You've got to develop it. You've got to hone it. And, part of developing your counselling skills is to have a listen, have a listen to your skills, listen to the feedback and develop as you go. And you're absolutely quite right, Ken. The theory is a big part of counselling, but actually the way we communicate, the way we show empathy, the way we show that we're hearing what our client's saying and they're heard is, I think, equally, if not more important.
100%. It's tricky, I guess. And speaking about when you're training, so you're on a formal course, chances are you get very little, if not no, opportunity to hear a qualified counsellor using skills. You get taught the skills by your tutor and told what that might look like. You can read about the skills in a book, but then you kind of paired off to go and practice skills, and you're practicing them without actually having seen it being done, unless of course you've been in your own therapy and you might have something to draw on, but it can be quite tricky. And if you kind of go onto YouTube and look around, you maybe find Carl Rogers working with Gloria, but that was, I guess, some time ago. And when you start kind of comparing yourself to somebody like Carl Rogers, you can kind of feel a little inferior in the beginning. So recording those skills, so vitally important, is something we certainly gave as advice to our students. In fact, we listened to the recordings together, proper contracted recordings together as a group, so that you have that kind of peer feedback on hearing other people's skills, how they are used, and be able to feed that back. But you're quite right, Rory, just in recording your own skills, and even if that is a simulated skills session, record it, listen back to it. And when you're listening back to it, you're less interested in what the client is saying. Client is going to bring some material. Think then about, how did I respond to that material? What skill was that? Was it a reflection? Was it a paraphrase? So name the actual skill that you're using. Did I use silence? And then have a think a little bit deeper. What did that skill do or not do within that recording? So you might listen to a client, they present something, you might do a reflection, and the client may go, no, that's not how it was. It's like this. So that's one road. Or they may go, yes, you've really got me there. So you kind of listen to what you almost evaluate your own skills. That's a great way to kind of strengthen them.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some little techniques or tips that I can share with you if you're practicing your counselling skills. Maybe you're doing that nowadays online because of the, we're recording this in the October of 2020 where COVID's around, and maybe you're doing this online. And there's a real tip that I'd like to share with you, and that is, if you're working in a triad, and a triad is one person who we would call the speaker, the person who's playing the client or being the client, the listener, the person who's in the role of the counsellor, and an observer, someone who's observing the interaction and making notes on the counsellor, or the listener's use of skills. And the thing to do is if you are an observer, is to ask the person who played the client first for their observation, because it might be different to you, the observer. And this happens a lot. I've observed skills sessions where, when the person who was in the role of the client was feeding back, they thought it was really, really good and really, really felt listened to. And when I'd listened to it, the same session, there were things that could easily be picked up. And I think if you ask the client first, you get a view from them that isn't influenced by the observer. If the observer goes first, it may be that the person who plays the role of the client actually is kind of influenced by the observer. So always let the person who plays the client, feedback first, and then the observer. And get yourself a recorder. I think that's really important. Record your skills and listen back. Now, I know, Ken, you're the person who absolutely loves skills. You're the skills meister, as it is. And you've got some quite definite ideas on the ways of recording counselling skills.
Yeah, well, I mean, start recording as soon as you can. And be happy to record your simulated skill sessions, because that's a great area for development in kind of listening back, peer listening back. Also, if you can, and this is going to be placement dependent and based on a really good, transparent contract with a client, if you can and are able to, record sessions with your clients, listen back to them. Of course, a whole pile of things come into here in terms of contracting, GDPR, how that file is stored, who it is shared with, who listens to that, which we're not going to go into here. We're just going to focus on the skills. But there is a lot to take into consideration if you are recording live clients. In terms of your recording device, have a think about recording device. And you rather than using a dictaphone or a phone, which is kind of not really designed as a recording device, even though it can do it, the phone. A dictaphone is designed as a recording device, but it's meant to be held right up to the mouth. So a dictaphone is, I pick it up, I hold it to my mouth, and I maybe give a message to somebody that they might be typing up for me. You want a recording device that you can put down, that is inobtrusive, that is kind of out of the way, that is going to be sensitive enough to pick up the nuances within the counselling. So you want to kind of be picking up if the client sighs, you want that recording device to be picking that up. And if you go and look on something like eBay or Amazon, and you look at musical recording device or digital recording device, look at the ones that musicians might use. So one of the product names is Zoom. That is just a product name for a music recorder, and they're pretty sensitive. They record to a little card that goes into the recorder, so there's no tapes or anything to worry about like there was back when I was studying. We were recording onto tapes. So record it as soon as you can, and then listen back. And if you can, listen back with peers, because you're going to get different feedbacks on that. And there's an area to avoid here. There is a danger area. And that danger area, when you've got a group and when you're listening together as a group and you're feeding back, there is a danger of slipping into being with what the client says. So the client might present with something, and then when the feedback turns to, when the client said this, what I think's really going on for them is this. That is not listening to skills. You're not listening to what the client is bringing. You're listening to how the counselor is responding. That is all that is important when you're listening to skills. How is the counselor responding to the narration that the client brings, and then what difference does that make? So immediately after the counselor has fed back or used silence or used a skill, what happens with the client? And that gives the effectiveness of the skill. And you can really refine and work on it. You can kind of look at that and go, okay, well, how could I have done that in a way that is more empathic? I don't like the way I did that. Maybe if I come across a similar situation in the future, I might use X or Y. So there's a lot of growth there.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, don't be too hard on yourself. I think that skills and the use of skills can be situational. I've heard a lot of skill sessions over time, and sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch between the person who's playing the client and the counsellor, which can happen in real life, and for some reason they just don't click. And sometimes you can hear really, really just exceptional uses of skills by two people who are connected. And here's the thing: it does really take both the speaker and the listener to be connected. You can only use your counselling skills if the person who's playing the client is giving you something to use. And I think that if that doesn't happen, that will show up in what you can do. You can only work with the material you've got. And I think it's also useful to use some kind of measuring tool. And a lot of colleges and universities use the Kharkov and Truax empathy scale, which is readily available all over the internet. Kharkov and Truax empathy scale, and you could mark yourselves, and just have a look. And I think the real excitement of skills is where you've done a recording with a peer and you're sharing it with your peers, and they're sat around the recorder listening. I remember those days where I all sat around the recorder, put it on a chair in the classroom and listen, and you can hear the opening, rather like a theatre. The opening, the client tentatively talks, and just how the person who's responding is working with that, what they're focusing on, what feeling that they're picking up from the client. And, I think it's exciting times, but the headline is, and this comes up a lot because we hear that in our Facebook group. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, go to Facebook, type in Counselling Tutor. You'll find us. We're a closed group. Just knock on the door. And of course, we're going to let you in. You'll be with thousands of like-minded people, students, qualified colleagues, supervisors and tutors. And one of the things that comes up in our Facebook feed a lot is, I'm not sure I'll ever get these skills. Practice, practice, practice. Don't be too hard on yourself. And I would say get a range of feedback. I think one of the things is to get a good range of feedback from different people on your skills, because they will hear different things and give you different views.
Bingo, really. And it's about they will hear, and you need to record it to be able to get that, or do what's called counselling in a fishbowl, where you have peers sitting around kind of like a triad, but with a lot of people watching, a multi-ad as it would be, Rory. The recording bit is vitally important. If you're on a formal course and you're not recording, then take it upon yourself. If that's not being kind of handed down from your learning institution, take it on yourself, because these are your skills that you'll be using in your practice. And even if you are just using your phone, the phone is better than nothing. Record those skills from as early as you can. Listen to them. And why? Well, if we go back to Carl Rogers, we kind of started this by speaking about how you might find Carl Rogers practicing his skills or listen to his skills on YouTube. Carl Rogers, when they used to record skills, he speaks about how his students, Rory, like you were saying, would gather around the reel-to-reel tape recorder. And in those days, it cost a lot of money for that equipment. It was new technology, and they would gather around. And Carl Rogers himself said it is the richest form of learning, listening to our skills, discussing the skills. What did that skill do? What could we have done differently next time? There's such rich learning there. And of course, you need to have your basic skills pinned down. You need to know the theory of the skills, what the skill is, why you use that skill, where you would use that skill. In our counselling study resource, which is our paid for section of Counselling Tutor for students of counselling and psychotherapy, we have a mass of skills information. Like you said, Rory, I'm kind of the skills meister. I've got a preference for skills. I really love them, and I built a lot of that skills section. And within there, we've actually got recorded skills in a simulated session where you can hear the counsellor and you can hear the person playing the client. The skill is used. We then go back and we kind of really look at that skill. What did it do? How did it work? What could we have done better? So you get a nice analysis of the skill as well. So if you're already a member of the Counselling Study Resources, log in, either type in skills in the search or go to resources skills section. You'll see it's all there for you. You can have a listen. If you're not a member of Counselling Study Resources and you want to check it out, you just go to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is there. And Rory, I think for this episode, we've taken a handout from the Counselling Study Resource, and it's a little master counselling skills handout, and you can get that for free by going to our podcast page from this episode. So go to counsellingtutor.com, click on the podcast tab. You'll find that right at the top of the page. Look for episode 169. That's today's episode, and right there you'll be able to download the master counselling skills handout from within that page.
Yes, absolutely. And if you are doing your counselling skills, be kind to yourself and just take it as part of the journey. It's a never-ending development. I think that it doesn't just end when you finally get your diploma or your degree. I think the counselling skills develop as you go along. And, sometimes I think it's worth, if you're even if you're a qualified practitioner or even if you're a student, bringing that as something to discuss in supervision and gaining some insight from your supervisor on how you're using the skills and what reaction the client had.
Yeah, thank you very much. And that is our student check-in. Move away from our student check-in into the Digital Counselling Revolution, where we look at how technology now plays a part in the way that we deliver therapy and the way that therapy is consumed in the modern age. And today we're going to be looking at producing a client information sheet.
Digital Counselling Revolution.
Well, the Digital Counselling Revolution, or the new way of working online, has changed a lot of how we operate, both as therapists, but also as we look at the information we give to our clients. The new normal, as we like to call it, has given us an opportunity to really look at the information we share with clients. And one of the things that's good practice if you're working online is to produce a client information sheet. I think there's something about a client maybe working from home or working remotely, where they may not be able to get the full picture of what's offered. So if we think of working face-to-face, people would meet at a room or meet at an agency. They'd get a sense of what the agency was just by walking through the door. They'd see the room, they'd see how it was set up. That's something that really isn't available if you're working online. So it's a good idea to produce a client information sheet. And it's not a contract. It's more like a kind of introduction to what counselling is and also maybe how you work, a little bit of an introduction on about yourself, how you work, and it's basically given so the client can make an informed choice. They look at it and they think, "Oh, right, so this is what counselling is." And also, you could do a frequently asked questions. There's lots of questions that clients may ask because they're not actually coming into an agency. So, how do I contact you? What's the technology that you use? You could even put a little bit about making sure that they're in a safe space, that they're in a private and confidential environment. There's just so much that you can put into an information sheet, but it is really, really useful because you've got to remember the client may be at home. They're probably not feeling great if they're coming for counselling. And just having that information is just a way of making an initial contact. I think it's a smart way of working, Ken.
Yeah, I think of it in terms of if you have a practice, the chances are that you'll have some kind of a brochure that explains who you are, what you offer, where you offer it from. You might have pictures of your counselling room in that, and you might leave that brochure around. So why do we do that? And we do that so that a person can get information. They're making an informed choice when they're coming to see you. They may be looking at you, they may be looking at who you are, what your qualifications are in your brochure. And when I say brochure, that could of course be a website as well. But the information that you give a client prior to meeting with them, I think is vitally important. And if you take online and telephone counselling, so with COVID coming along, there's been so much of a switch to working with digital technology. And if you look to your ethical body, chances are your ethical body will be highly suggesting that you get formal training in this area because there are so many differences. And of course, we've spoken about many of those in the Digital Counselling Revolution section because of this very point. So if you're maybe going and spending over 100 hours of your time training to work safely and ethically online, you're gathering a lot of information during that training, new information that you may not have had. And we see this in comments from our very own course of people feeding back again and again and again. Probably one of the most frequent comments we get is, "I didn't realize how much there was to learn." And this is qualified practitioners who've been working for some time. Now think about that in terms of the client. The client has not gone and done a 100-hour course. They don't know what to expect. They don't know what the differences between online and telephone are from, say, face-to-face counselling. So we need to be giving that information to the client before they engage in therapy so that they can make an informed choice. Is this for me? It might not be. In fact, online is not for everybody. So giving that information out of what they can expect. You've mentioned a few things there already that you might cover. And another thing you might cover there is what the benefits are and what the challenges are of online therapy to the client. We've covered this in previous episodes of the Digital Counselling Revolution. So just go back through our back catalogue on our podcast page and you'll see that we've covered a lot of the information. This kind of brings it together. Confidentiality, what technology, as you've already mentioned there, Rory, what technologies are there? And it may be second nature to us. We might be going, "Oh, you know what? Well, I've decided to use Zoom. So there you go. I'm just going to tell the person that we use Zoom." But they may never have heard of Zoom. So how do you introduce what Zoom is? And how do you say it in a way that they can get it and not feel, "Oh, I don't understand what that is. I'm now going to shy away from that." So that's what that information sheet is for. Information sheet that you can send if somebody contacts you and says, "I'm interested in engaging in online therapy with you." You can reply with, "Here's some information for you." And you might have that same information on your website, on your online and telephone counselling page.
Yes, and it might be that you include a picture of yourself. A lot of people are doing phone counselling, and there's a lot of phone counselling around now. And in fact, I would say that phone counselling is probably equal or not more to face-to-face because of the convenience of it, and also certainly for student colleagues, it may be a preferred way of working. The agencies prefer that you work on the phone. Sending a picture of yourself to the client, including that in your fact sheet, because we do know that when people are working on the phone, they do fantasize about who their therapist is. And, again, we've covered transference. I've probably not mentioned transference for a few episodes, but transference and counter-transference and fantasy transference. So if you have a picture, have a nice picture taken, a professional, well, I'd say a professional picture, but a picture that would show you in a professional setting, and include that. That can go a long way to mitigating or reducing this kind of, I wonder what my therapist looks like. You send the picture and they know exactly who you are. And I think that's important, because I was thinking about this the other day. If I was a client, I would wonder who I was talking to if it was a series of sessions. And I would wonder who I was talking to. So maybe include a picture. And I think also a little bit about safety. You could put a generic piece in there about making sure that the clients, that if you feel that, the environment may not be safe, someone might come in unexpectedly, that you might want to use some kind of code word or something so the conversation would end, and the client could retain their anonymity.
Nobody can say that. I bet everybody knows what we mean, though. Anonymity.
Anonymity. So have a think about what you could put into a fact sheet. It's really an introduction to you, maybe something around the organisation. And here's an idea: if you are working as a placement counsellor, maybe really, really useful to speak with your placement and ask if they're doing anything around sending a fact sheet out, because I just think it's such a good idea. And also, the client gets something initially at the first contact. They know exactly what they're going to get, who you are. It really might settle nerves, because sometimes clients, it's a big step for clients to go for counselling, and certainly if they're doing it in their own homes, it puts such a different aspect to it, I think.
Oh, very much so. So very different in so many ways. You speaking about a picture, and 100% right, that shows you in a professional light. And it's an idea to maybe get a picture that represents who you are right now. So as an example, right now I have a beard. You probably can't see it over the podcast, but here it is. I'm scratching it. And but if I kind of had a picture on my fact sheet that showed me clean shaven, and then I met via video chat with a client, and now I had this big full beard, there's a mismatch there. So try to think, when you're putting a picture on, of how does that represent who I am right now. I know I'm sometimes tempted to go through my back pictures and pick one from 10 years ago, because I look a lot better than Rory. but it's about kind of introducing yourself to the client, who you are now. And we're speaking now about this being a fact sheet, but that fact sheet can also be on your website. And on your website, you can choose to use different media. So on my practice site for my online and telephone counselling, I made a small video so that the client had an opportunity to meet me virtually, as it were, where I was speaking to them as I would if we met up online in a video chat. They could hear my voice, they could get a sense and a feel for who I am, and I covered most of the points that were in my actual downloadable fact sheet verbally as well. So I was also, I guess, catering for different learning styles. And just kind of before we kind of move away from this, the other thing is, when I was studying and I needed to do my own personal therapy, and that was done face-to-face. So this is not remote or online, but I think that it kind of covers a point here. What I did was I went to a counselling directory. I'm not going to say which one, because there are a number out there, looking for a therapist that was near me. And as I was looking, some therapists had chosen to put a picture up of who they were with their listing, and some had chosen not to put a picture up of who they were in their listing. I didn't even open any of the listings that didn't have a picture. I went through the pictures looking for somebody, rightly or wrongly, but I went through looking for the picture of somebody I felt I could connect with, interestingly enough.
Yeah, well, it's a human condition, isn't it? We like to know who we're dealing with. And of course we have to be respectful for people who may be maybe blind or have sight difficulties, but who would probably adapt in a different way to working out who they can work with. But I think the idea of a video, and here's an idea just off the top of my head, is if you were to email your sheets, your information sheet, you could put a link to a YouTube video of yourself, and you could say, if you want to see a little bit about me, here I am, click this link, and it'd open up, and there would you be. And I would suggest you just explain a little bit about yourself, who you are, what your, how you could help clients maybe, or, a little bit about them, your modality. You could talk quite a lot. I would say, if you are going to make a little video that links from your fact sheet, get your peers to review it as well. Get your peers to have a look over it, because sometimes they can give us feedback. But that is part of being in the information age. We're in the digital age, and a lot of the things that we did when we were face-to-face therapists, we've had to adapt to be online. And it's interesting, face-to-face and online are two distinct ways of working. It's got into the language now. So compile your fact sheet. Why don't you compile your fact sheet and share them with your peers, and see what they say, or colleagues? I think it'd be an interesting exercise, and also it might focus you down onto the values of your practice. What are you about? I think that's not a bad thing, being a bit reflexive.
It's we started off speaking about mastering counselling skills and the importance of peer feedback, and the same is true here. We run an online and telephone counselling course at Counselling Tutor, and within our course we've got a group, and it's a private Facebook group, and it's just for the course members, and we've got thousands of counsellors that are undertaking the course and that have graduated from the course in that group, and we encourage the sharing of all of the different aspects of the course. You kind of build something and then you share it with your peers, and it's really interesting to see the kind of feedback, the support that is given within a group, and how important that peer feedback is. So I agree with you, Rory. Share it with people, get other eyes on it, get your peers to look over it for you. And of course, if you're interested in looking at the Counselling Tutor online and telephone counselling course, you can get more information at counselingtutor.com. So that is our Digital Counselling Revolution for today. And we now move on to Practice Matters, where we look at what we might come across in practice. And speaking today about working with suicidal clients, we had a recent lecture on this in our Counsellor CPD library, Rory.
Yeah, we did. We were fortunate enough to have a lecture by Andrew Reeves, who, for those of you who don't know Andrew Reeves, he was a former chair of the BACP. It's an area of speciality, working with clients who may wish to take their own lives. And I think we'll start off with that. I think the word suicide has really, really judgmental connotations. And I think sometimes, we for instance, we now don't use the word commit suicide. And the reason for that was that it has this idea that someone's breaking the law, because it used to be against the law to take your own life. And it was only in the last 30 years, I think, that law has been changed. So we usually use the term maybe thinking of taking their own lives. And the thing that I came away from Andrew Reeves' lecture was having a sense of risk. Sometimes, I hear people say, well, there's no risk, or there's a lot of risk. It's actually not as binary as that. There's risks in everything. And I think that sometimes you've got to be really attuned to some of the risks that are around. And I think also having a good idea of what heightens somebody's risk of maybe taking their own life. And there's been a lot of research around. So if we think of risk factors, clients who may have self-harm or have had attempts at taking their own life, talking about methods of suicide, lots dwelling on insoluble problems, just really getting lost in problems, things like giving away possessions, hints at not wanting to be here anymore. And in fact, one of those can be, well, I think I'm a bit of a burden to people. I don't think I really want to be here anymore. I think the world would be better off without me. Those are risk factors. People withdrawing from friends, a lack of personal care, certainly drug and alcohol misuse, and being over cheerful. One of the things that we observe sometimes in people who are considering taking their own lives is that they become, even if they may present as depressed, all of a sudden they turn up and they're ecstatically happy, and it kind of goes against how they've been previously. So we need to look at those risk factors, and I think that anybody who is working face to face with clients needs to understand this. And then also we need to look at protective factors, and I think one of the biggest protective factors is a trusting relationship. The fact that people are talking, as long as people are talking, communicating, and the therapist is there listening and asking that fundamental question: how can I help you? What can I do? That is a big protective factor.
Indeed, it's a topic that we cover from time to time, and as you said, Rory, it's kind of a little sensitive just using the word suicide. There's a sensitivity around that, and this, for me, again, it's about CPD. When we graduate, chances are that this topic, if it has been covered in our training, has been covered shallowly, because it is a deep topic, and it's a topic that demands study and continuing professional development within that area. We've spoken before of how a client can only go as far as the counsellor is able to go, and we are able to go further when we develop our competences in certain areas. And something like someone taking their own life, when the person is right there in front of you and they are showing maybe that they are from a high risk group, that they are demonstrating the warning signs, we want to have done the CPD to be able to recognize that when it shows, first of all, so that we don't miss it. And then we want to know how to work with that if it is shown. We can hardly say, well, I tell you what, when I see you next time, I'll go and do a little bit of research into that until I speak to you next, because we're talking about life and death, potentially a life and death situation over here. And it all starts with understanding the policy and expectations of the setting that you are working within. Are you working in private practice? And what are your policies? Are you working within an agency? What are the policies state about somebody sharing that they may want to take their own life? And then the contract. How is this contracted? Because when a topic like this comes up, we hardly want to be then bringing in boundaries. We want to be covering that within the contract, so that you contract carefully and really clearly prior to any kind of presentation. And of course, as already stated, knowing how to identify a higher risk group and knowing what warning signs to look out for, and then being able to identify the protective factors around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And developing a crisis plan. A crisis plan is outlining the risks, highlighting the danger. Write it with your client. So you might want to write a crisis plan with your client. So if you feel like this and you're not in the therapy room, who can you talk to? Who can you phone up? Maybe it's contacting the Samaritans. Maybe it's contacting a friend. Maybe it's actually physically appearing at someone's house and say, I just need to be around people. And also, if you're making a crisis plan, review it every session and see where the client is. I've worked with clients who, have been imminently thinking of taking their own lives, and they've done a lot of creative things to slow the decision making process down. One that I was told by a colleague was that, that someone who's having a really, really bad time, and they were thinking of taking their own life, and they were thinking of doing it by taking pills, and they put a picture of their grandchild next to the, propped it up against the pills. So if they were tempted to go to it, you could see the grandchild, and that gave a different framing to what their life meant. There are lots of very creative ways that you can help clients with this. And, hopefully as the course of therapy takes place, and people can talk about what's really going on for them, what's really hurting, the ideation, and that again is a very medical word, or the motivation for life-taking behaviors may drop down as the therapy starts to work. And one of the things that was told to me by Dr. Ewan Gallivan, who I interviewed a few years ago, who is I think he's a world-renowned expert on suicide, was that therapy can't take place if the client isn't there. And it's always stuck with me, that, Ken, always stuck with me. I've said to clients, if you're not here, therapy cannot take place, and it's a very powerful statement to make. It's basically saying, well, you're here, there's hope.
Yeah. Yes. And it could just be that tipping point. The fact that they are there, the fact that they are looking for someone to speak to about that, indicates that they're that seed of hope. But it can also indicate that final desperation, and it's a life and death topic we're talking about here. We really are, and that's what it boils down to at the end. I remember when I was training, I was a student on training, and around about 2/3 of the class hadn't arrived. They were late. Everybody was late. And we were discussing, I wonder why that is. And then they eventually arrived, and they'd closed the motorway because somebody had taken their life. They jumped from a bridge on the motorway. And I remember thinking, I'm here in training to hopefully be that little gap that somebody might present. Because when somebody is taking their life, often, not always, but often, it is because they feel they have no other options, that the world might be better off if I wasn't around. And they may have reached out multiple times and not had somebody who heard them. And when somebody presents in our therapy room, we get the opportunity to hear them. And then, of course, there's the other side of that, which is the administrative side, when how do we record the concerns and the actions that we're going to be taking? We need to be doing that. We need to be documenting what we're doing. We need to be speaking with our supervisor, colleagues, a manager where this is appropriate. And again, this is back to what that contract says. It's the contract that sets the stage for this. And within that contract, we maybe want to be obtaining consent right at the beginning. It might be that within your contracting, you might state, if harm to self, harm to others, I would need to break confidentiality, and is that okay with you? And getting that informed consent in the very beginning, so that you're not kind of turning to that at a crisis moment. And I think the most important thing is, if you're in doubt about somebody's immediate safety, act. Do something. If you're not sure, act on it.
Yeah, absolutely, Ken. I mean, I can't agree with you more. And also, don't skirt around the issue. If you're hearing the client talk about ending their own life, ask them. One of the fantasies and misinformation around suicide is that if you ask someone if they're thinking they may take their own life, then it'll just exasperate it, and they will. It's not true. I think probably the opposite is true. If you ask somebody and they say yes, then that's a chance of hope to be able to speak with them and say, okay, let's talk about that. Let's see where you are with that. So don't be afraid of that. And in my experience of training students, it's quite a hard one to ask for the first time. That very hard to ask a client, have you ever thought of hurting yourself or taking your own life? But sometimes and certainly if you're doing a person-centered course where you're told not to ask questions, sometimes I'm afraid you just have to, and that is one good question to ask in that situation.
Yeah, and that is courage. It's courage, but also, I guess, having the knowledge that it is appropriate to ask that question. And as Andrew Reeves points out, be willing to explore through open and direct questions. For example, have you ever thought of hurting yourself when you feel bad? Or maybe have you got any thoughts of not wanting to be alive anymore? Those are very direct, probing questions, and it takes an element of courage and maybe an element of knowing that it's okay to ask those questions, and we get that from further study, from doing CPD.
Yes, and if you're listening to this and you've not had a client who's considering taking their own life, and you're not sure, it's such a rich area for supervision, as Ken said, for CPD, for further learning, for colleague collaboration, to speak with colleagues. And just, I think colleague collaboration is a really good thing, because you're going to meet colleagues who have experienced clients who may be in that place, and they can share with you what they did, what happened with the client, to give you confidence and also the ability to be able to work with it. As Andrew Reeves said, don't put your head in the sand like an ostrich. If it comes into the therapy room, you really, really, really do have to address it.
Yeah, if you're interested in watching Dr. Andrew Reeves' lecture on working with suicidal clients, you can get that from our CPD library. And to find that, you just go to counsellingtutor.com. All the information is there.
Well, it's been a packed episode, if I do say so myself. We started off with Mastering Counselling Skills, and don't forget to go to podcast 169 on counsellingtutor.com to download that really comprehensive handout. We talked in Digital Counselling Revolution about producing client information sheet to help the clients understand what the service is and maybe introduce yourself. And then in Practice Matters, we talked about suicide or clients taking their own life, and explored the kind of thinking and processes that you need as a practitioner to be aware of, to be able to be in service of a client who may be really, really desperate. And as always, stay grounded, stay safe, and join the Counselling Digital Revolution.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.